No? There we go. Fine. Took forever to log in. Now we're worldwide, people. Excited? Yeah. Interesting.
Can you say hi to Anna?
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Anna.
Good. In August of 1918, a new person arrived in the capital of Russia. What's the capital of Russia in 1917?
Or is it Moscow?
Moscow, no, it wasn't Moscow. Even though Moscow, in a way, was the most important city in a lot of ways. St. Petersburg was the capital, but they didn't call it St. Petersburg during the war. St. Petersburg is a German name. They called it Petrograd. I just like to. And then after the Russian Civil War, it's going to be named after this man who arrived. His name, Vladimir Lenin. And Lenin was overjoyed when the war started. He was in exile in Switzerland because of his revolutionary activities. He was a Marxist, what we would call after his death, actually while he was still alive, Marxist-Leninist. He was a Marxist. He did believe that because of industrialization, the workers, or eventually they would create this perfect socialist world where the workers control the means of production. Remember that for socialism. He believed that. But he believed we didn't have to wait for the workers. What he believed were just a few leaders, intellectuals. Intellectuals will push the country to revolution. Even if the people aren't ready, even if the country isn't fully industrialized, like Marx said it had to be, they can push the peasants to rebel. The peasants don't know enough on their own, we will teach them. And immediately, it's already breaking up from socialism. Socialism is very anti-social Darwinistic. Well, here the concept that the leaders know more than other people, that's pretty social Darwinistic. That's what he believed. Mao Zedong in China would be the same thing. We can push this agrarian, non-industrial China into this perfect socialist world, even if people aren't ready for it. His group of leaders was a small, very well-organized group, and there were many groups like it, of different kind of socialists and anarchists. His group was called the Bolsheviks. So the Bolsheviks are communists. And there are other groups of communists, two other groups of socialists. They really are divided. And they believe all we have to do is overthrow the government and pull the rest of the people with us. So by definition, they're already going really far away from Marx. Well, Lenin arrived. Let's look at the map. Here's Switzerland. Here's Petrograd. You see an issue. What's in the way? Enemies. He could jump off the Matterhorn right here. How do you get there? Who would want Lenin in Petrograd? Exactly. Germany got him there. Germany rolled the die. Germany knew if we do this, we might actually encourage revolution in our own country. But what Germany was doing is, if we could get the Bolsheviks there, have a revolution, knock Russia out of the war, now we can focus on the West and maybe win, especially now before the Americans arrive in large numbers. So Leningrad did that with German help. Both, after the war, both sides, or even while this is happening, both sides acted like it didn't happen, but everybody knew. The German government made a deal with the devil, to their point of view. So in August, they did try to revolt. It failed. Lenin would have to flee for a short time and then come back. But in October, another revolution. The October Revolution is also the Bolshevik Revolution. Even on the Western calendars, it's going to be in November. Just go with me. Russia's on a different calendar at this time. What they did is, small cadres of Bolsheviks, what they did is they took over or removed from power the government in Petrograd and the government in Moscow. which was already collapsing. The army had mutinied, everything was falling apart. This was not a real bloody revolution, even though there was some fighting at the Winter Palace within Leningrad. That was it. It was relatively bloodless compared to what's going to come. And they overthrew the government. The thing was, it's just a couple thousand. How could they take over the biggest country in the world? Well, there's a power vacuum. Nobody's in charge because the other government had collapsed. Kerensky would eventually go, I think he would die in Los Angeles. Still trying to come back. But here's why. Their slogan, it's 3 parts, but the first 2 parts are all we need to know. They promise bread and peace. They also promise land. But bread and peace, land for the peasants, which they never really meant. People are starving and they want out of this war. That was enough. That would coalesce power. Germany's gamble worked, at least on the surface. And it would lead directly to Lenin and the Bolsheviks signing a treaty with Germany in early 1918, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Russia pulled out of the war. The Allies were furious. Absolutely furious. This was an incredibly harsh treaty. Germany won and could dictate the terms. Now the city's Brest in Belarus, but then it was Brest-Litovsk. And if you look at this map right here, see this line? All this territory here, Russia, west of this line, Russia lost. Germany gained control. Now, Germany didn't annex per se. They created puppet governments, like the Protectorate of the Ukraine, or Belarus, which they called White Russia, or Lithuania. They created puppet governments. The Russians lost a lot. This will be crucial when the treaty negotiation for end of World War I that we kind of lumped together as the Treaty of Versailles. The Western Allies are going to look at this and say, look how bad the Russians were, how harsh they were at Brest-Litovsk. Why should we treat them well after what they did just a year earlier? So this is going to have great impact. It's one of the things that's forgotten after war. Trust me, Germany would forget about it. Why did you treat us so rough? Remember what you did? Now Lenin is thinking, we'll get it back later. Lenin's sights are set on Russia. I'm sorry, his sights are set on Germany, which he almost got in 1920. We'd have a different world. Yeah.
I'm confused on why. So where was he before he was moved to?
He's a Russian. He's a leader of the Bolsheviks, but the Russians exiled him to Switzerland.
After.
Actually, it's before World War I began, for revolutionary activity within Russia.
Okay.
He was doing terrorist acts, and the big thing was bank robberies.
So then he was not a Russian. He wanted to get back in.
Well, his thing was he wanted to go back to Russia and take over. And so he was hoping the war would get a revolution inside Russia.
All right.
That's what he hoped. And so when Germany made that offer, he jumped at it, thinking, okay, now's my chance. And what would happen after this is going to be called the Russian Civil War. And this would be a bloody, horrific affair. And wrapped around it would be one of the worst famines in world history in 1919 in Russia. Absolute hell this would be fought. And the Bolsheviks looked like there would be trouble at first. The Bolsheviks and their supporters are soon going to be called the Reds. So basically all the Bolsheviks and other socialists would kind of unify to keep out those who want to get rid of them. So groups like the Mensheviks. Fighting them would be a hodgepodge of groups lumped together would be called the Whites. Now the Whites, this is a really mixed group. Some want to bring back the Tsar, some want a republic. There are also going to be things like hundreds of thousands of Czech prisoners of war would join the Whites and things like that. So it's just a confusing mess. But the Allies are going to jump in. And it's going to be, we kind of lump it together with a simple Allied intervention. The Western Allies were furious after this. And they jumped in on the side of the whites, the Western Allies. And they sent troops and supplies to help the whites.
We were with them.
Those fighting the Bolsheviks. So they're going to be, people wanted the monarchy back. Some wanted a republic. And then just whoever would be against the Bolsheviks. That's part of the reason they lost, is because they weren't unified. And so when this happened, right here, the British, the French, the Italians, the Japanese, and the Americans all sent troops to Russia to intervene. So the United States actually sent troops to, do I have the map, please, be right here, to Vladivostok. The US and the Japanese, actually the Japanese started advancing up the railroad. Also, troops here, Murmansk, a lot of Montanans, a couple of regiments recruited from Montana ended up here. They thought they were going to France, and then they're up here north of the Arctic Circle to fight the Bolsheviks, and they would fight. So the United States, along with the British and French, who went mostly here, joined in. They failed. 1919, the Western Allies pulled out. And eventually the Reds would win. And one more thing went with it, I almost forgot. This started going back to 1905. There were groups of workers, but also soldiers who got together to form kind of like a labor union. And in it, they called these groups of workers the Soviets. And that is where you get the term Soviets. And the Reds were able to unify with the Soviets. That's why after they would win the Civil War, they called themselves the Soviet Union, or the Union of Soviet Socialistic Republics, or the USSR. And that is their flag. Yeah.
Who were the Soviets?
They were basically, think about like little labor unions. And they joined together of little workers' organizations to fight for their own rights. And the Bolsheviks were smart enough to, at least at first, unify with them to win the Civil War. Now, it's no coincidence that you're going to get this massive. Remember the IWW? Who was the IWW organizer that was killed in Butte? Was lynched? Frank Little. Yeah, good teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
No slogans.
Okay.
Collective punishment.
Yeah.
So, there's going to be this fear of Bolsheviks, and they're going to say immediately, IWW, no longer are they bomb-throwing anarchists. What are they? Bolsheviks or Reds. And that's where you get the first Red Scare. Where that comes from is directly because of that total war, fear that the socialists will somehow undermine us against the war, to they might take over the government. And you can see the beginnings of what's going to become the Cold War. And nobody in the United States remembered that the U.S. sent thousands of troops that would go intervene to fight the communists in Russia. But in the Soviet Union, they taught school children from day one, the Americans invaded. The Americans hate you, and therefore what? Either defeat them or they'll do what? Yeah, they're coming again. This would help fuel anti-American fear within the Soviet Union to justify their totalitarian state. This Allied intervention is a big deal. But Americans forgot because it's embarrassing, they lost. It didn't work. But back to the war then. While this is going on, while the Russian Revolution is going on, which has such great impact on the future, the United States is sending troops. At first a trickle, but eventually 200,000 troops a month. And they're getting through the Russian submarines, because what did the British adopt that basically allowed them to defeat did I say Russian submarines? I think I did. The German submarines. What did the British adopt to defeat the German submarines? What tactic?
Convoys.
Yeah, convoys. Not one U.S. troop ship was sunk by German U-boats in World War I. not in World War II, but in World War I. And so, American troops would organize their own command. They would be called the American Expeditionary Force, or you just simply see it as the AEF. And they're eventually going to have the 1st American Army, the 2nd American Army. I mean, they're going to organize an army. The British and the French were mad. They just wanted to use American troops as replacements for their units. But the Americans correctly said, no, Americans have to fight under American command, just like British troops are fighting under British officers, etc. And so, it will delay American troops to the anger of Britain and France, but the commander, General John Pershing, would make sure it's one U.S. Army. And he will become, in a way, hero. Is that for me, Tiffany? Is that phone going away? Away, or I get a phone?
It was.
Go ahead, tell us. So, with that, but it will be a while before large numbers of American troops can enter the war. And so, before that could happen, the Germans rolled the die again. Remember Hindenburg and Ludendorff? They tried one more time. They could pull 1 million troops now from here. Bring them here for one big attempt. March 1918 is going to be called the Spring Offensive.
Peace is no longer Russian.
Nope, new heading. So now the Americans are in it. The Russian Revolution now is over because of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. New heading, which is eventually going to be the end of, going to the end of the war. We're going to end the war. It happened shockingly fast. The Germans have been developing tactics along with the French. The British never really adopted them. The Americans were still fighting like it was 1914. American casualties would be outrageous when they would really begin fighting in large numbers in August. But Germans realized no more mass attacks. Quick, intense, heavy artillery bombardment, and then attack in small units. Infiltrate, get behind the enemy, bypass strong points. They used new weapons. For example, they invented a submachine gun that fired a lot of bullets very quickly. Pistol bullets, inaccurate, but put a lot of bullets out there. They would carry burlap bags full of hand grenades that have more firepower. Flamethrowers. These specially trained soldiers, you remember what they're called? Minutemen's American Revolutionary War. Troopers? Stormtroopers, yeah. Once again,
Actual name?
yeah.
Oh, I thought that the stormtroopers from Star Wars just came from that.
No, he literally just took the name Stormtroopers from the Germans. World War I, just took it. And they would call the brown shirts who would follow the Nazi stormtroopers too. So you wanted something that kind of evil. So they would attack. And their goal, attack the British. Once again, they thought the British Army was right here. And they thought they could push the British, divide the British away from the French army, Britain would pull out before American forces arrived in large numbers. They weren't scared of the American army per se, but they could do the math. That many people, eventually 2 million men, 4 million men total in the US drafted, Germany is just going to run out of men. Attrition. And so they attacked, and it worked. For the first time in the war, a breakthrough happened. In the West. First time. They broke through. They broke through the British lines. They advanced. Well, eventually they would advance 60 miles. This had never happened before. The Germans figured it out. They advanced quickly and were moving past. Now, the stormtroopers took a lot of casualties, but still. They were told that the British were starving to death because of the U-boat blockade. They were told this. They weren't. And this is one of those things that will cause, this is March, but it would help destroy the army in September. They were told, we're winning the war. One push, Britain will be down. They're going to quit. We know it. But when they got to the trenches that the British evacuated and pulled back, what did they find? Yeah, all this food. They hadn't seen anything like this since the war began. All this food. So actually, the British or German discipline started to break down. They started to loot, eat the food. Remember I told you about the Confederates doing that in the Civil War? And think about what the Germans are thinking. Our officers, our leaders. What are they doing? What?
Lying.
They've been lying. If they lied about this, what else have they been lying about? This, ironically, they broke through. This is my small class. Good afternoon. Sorry to bug you guys. Well, you weren't ready.
I said it.
Oh.
So we would like to, basically, Mr. Partridge is, is being given a distinguished teacher award, so.
Right on. Way to
We had to, I feel like George or Jeb Bush. Now please clap.
Yes. I'm going to say, please, again. So, Teresa Minisco.
Oh.
Oh,
wow.
So, congratulations.
Well, thank you. That's really cool. And Teresa was just here, so she.
Oh, we just missed her.
She's good.
Yep.
She'll be here next period.
Oh, that's great. Well, then I
Oh, we'll
think
probably be
that
down
you
here next
have time to make cupcakes for next period.
Well, that's really cool. Thank you. That's neat.
I hope they were able to control this class.
They're totally out of
They're
control.
out of
You can
control.
see that.
This is crazy.
Yeah, and his other AP classes are, yeah, I don't know why.
And then next year. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. It goes in waves, you know.
Oh, I keep them in the locks.
Yeah, oh yeah, why do we have it?
No, not why, it's, oh yeah, to keep the.
Oh yeah, they know. I mean, it's crazy. You should have seen it 2 weeks ago. We run through the stocks and, yeah, they're pillarized and stuff.
When I taught in Elwood, Montana, this was the size of my largest class. It was 5
Really?
students, yeah. The rest were all smaller than that, so awkward.
All right, one last thing.
That's very
I'm
cool.
gonna grab your phone number, if that's all right, and schedule a time for you guys to meet next week and get your photo taken.
Oh,
They have this
Look at
little.
the
God.
here.
Teresa's gotta be with, picture of me, yeah. Now it's still.
You guys can put this on.
Yeah, this photographer, we got selfies. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, you. I started to say assassin and then I saw that you wasn't just.
I see this girl walking down the hall and thinking, oh boy, either we're all in trouble. They're taking me away.
I
You
saw-
guys finally told on me.
I was like, assassin. I started and then saw that, like, at least accordingly.
No, this is nice. Like,
Maybe not. Do you know what the assassin is? Will you please explain to Liberty about the assassin?
we got work to do.
Okay, well, after the class.
Okay, really quick, you want?
You got that whole thing on video.
I know, and now it's gonna be on video. We should, I didn't even think about that. Oh God, this is gonna be on video.
You can show it to
Me kind of awkwardly going, I never know what to say, you know, what am I supposed to say? Of course.
Yeah.
Every year it's like, what am I supposed to say? And the thing is, I teach AP US history, so I get a lot of really good students, so. Okay, what do we do? Here's the deal, everyone's out to get me, correct? Yeah. I'm not paranoid, it's true, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the assassins come. And so we have not been good, we don't get many people coming in here, because I'm way in the corner, but if someone comes in, I don't know, might be someone with a knife or a shoe. Right? So what do you have to do?
Assassin.
Yell assassin, correct? And we were supposed to do, if it's an administrator, like a Mr. Zanto, huh?
Can I do that?
Go yell assassin, then hide under the desk.
I started to, but then I was like, well, there's other.
So should we try real fast?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can make this work. All right. This is on film, and if you don't yell, I know. So
Wait, are you an administrator?
I'm a stranger. So what do? I walk in. Assassin.
Assassin!
No, but now I'm an administrator.
Ready to get
Administrator. Assassin.
Assassin.
And then under the desk.
I don't fit.
Hey,
I don't.
let you stay under here and be a lot safer.
Yeah.
Ah, very smart. And went under the other desk.
I don't have to, like, second that.
Now, are we gonna have to work on this every day from now on?
Yeah.
In the past, they've given flowers. I'm glad there wasn't a flower.
Oh, I wish there was.
How'd you get chosen for that?
Students.
They just, which, like, do they have to be like certain?
Students that are distinguished achievers or distinguished students.
So we got Koreans.
Well, they have a certain criteria that the AGF does, and then they pick certain students, and those students can pick, I think they can pick 3 students, or 3 teachers, and then they take, you know, they take teachers, they try to rotate it. So for the most part, no, they might have people come almost every year, but not every year, except for Mr. Pedersen, who started it once, so they're gonna finish him the whole way. I think he's the only one.
Who's had one every single year? That's good to know.
12,
12 years.
I think.
When did it?
But I have AP history, so I have a lot of really good students, you know, so it's a little unfair to the ones that don't get a lot of students, so, grain of salt, I didn't score.
And it's- Go you.
And the funny thing is Teresa's sister picked me too,
Bless
so it's in the back. And Mr. Carter seniors.
you.
So where are we? We got the white, the British. And so this really began to break down morale. And then when they started advancing, think about they've been fighting over that land, that little 20-mile stretch for years. It was a wasteland. They outran their supplies. So they advanced 60 miles, but then the offense just kind of stopped. And Ludendorff didn't know where to attack next. Over the next 4 months, there'd be 5 more big offensives. One would even try to attack near Paris, but they weren't coordinated. They would break through and then kind of grind down, and the Allies could recover. And at one place on the way to Paris, at a town called Chateau-Thierry, was the first time large numbers of American forces, actually it's I, Chateau-Thierry, that's supposed to be a Y, American forces would be used, and they would fight very bravely. Their tactics were bad. The American soldiers, they weren't trained for the right type of fighting, made a lot of mistakes. Officers made mistakes. But this was a shock to the Germans, another big shock. The Americans are there. The Americans are in the fight, and now we have a real problem. Okay, so with that, the German offensive stopped, and their reserves were used up. They didn't knock the British out of the war. The morale was beginning to snap. Ludendorff began to lose his mind, literally. I think it already lost it, but the rest of it was snapping. And then the Allies, during this, finally picked a generalissimo, a commander of all forces, 1 general, 1 staff, a French general by the name of Marshal Ferdinand Foch, who understood that this war, we're going to have to fight it to the finish. F-O-C-H. It kind of looks like an H, doesn't it? I know you.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was.
Oh, I see, because my E's sometimes look like that, don't they?
Yeah.
Ferdinand Foch. And Foch and his big offensive,
Wait, is he the leader of the
he of all Allied forces. He's French, but he'd be the overall commander. He'd be a good one. Not that he was brilliant, but he kept it together. He kind of his force of will. In World War II, it'd be an American, Dwight Eisenhower. Different style. Not like brilliant commanders, but just determined this is what we're going to do. Keep the bigger Allies together. August of 1918, then, the plan was for one more big offensive. One more offensive, August 18th. Or the Allies, I'm sorry. One more offensive for the year, push the Germans back, and then the plan was in March or so of 1919, one more big offensive. Foch wanted to decisively defeat the Germans. But everything began to fall apart for the Germans. The realization hit that we're not going to win the war. Our leaders were lying. There soon began food riots and disruptions back into Germany in August. And when this offensive began, it pushed the Germans back over 50 miles in a week. And this spelled the beginning of the end of the German army. By September, on one day, 10,000 German or 100,000 Germans surrendered in one fight. Germans never surrendered in that number because there's always going to be prisoners. Their army began to fall apart. Ludendorff lost his mind, literally then. He alternated from we can win the war to we must surrender, it's all over. His stepson that he was very close to died in the fighting in August. And Ludendorff had the body brought back to his chateau where his headquarters was, and he kept it with him for the next 3 weeks, the body. He'd eat with it, he'd be there, he would have it put in his bed so he could sleep next to the body. He lost his mind. I mean, he lost it. And that was the beginning of the end. Going into October, the rest of the Central Powers, one by one, starting with the Ottomans, began to collapse. The whole thing began to fall apart. And then early November, a combination of food riots and the Navy mutinied, and the Kaiser abdicated. The Kaiser abdicated in November. It happened so fast. I mean, think about it. They broke through. The Germans got their biggest victory of the war, arguably, on the Western Front, and less than 10 months later, it's all falling apart. The Kaiser ran away to the Netherlands. He would die there in 1942. He abdicated. The new provisional government agreed to an armistice. Now, an armistice is a ceasefire. Basically, it's saying in an armistice, we agree to quit shooting, and then we'll have a peace conference. Has everyone got that? They agreed. But then they decided, we could do the armistice. This was someone on Foch's staff. Think about it for a second. We could have an armistice on a special day. If this is going to be, we're already calling it the Great War. Soon the war to end all wars. Nobody could imagine going through this hell again. So let's have it end on a special moment that everybody will remember. So they would fight for nearly 2 more days. In fact, the last time Americans would go over at the top and attack German lines would be an hour before the war ended. They decided, let's end it on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. November 11th, 1918.
Why 11?
So the days all work. You know, 11th month, so you go to the 11th. Yeah, the Americans attack one more time even though the war is over. The Germans are yelling, go back, it's over. In fact, 5 minutes before the war ended, before 11 o'clock, everybody fired everything they had into the air. It's just huge noise and then silence. And part of the deal with the armistice, the Germans agreed, because the Germans were beaten. They were a beaten army. But they agreed and they told the men, the German soldiers, don't mutiny, you march home, we'll release you from the army as soon as you get to your hometown. So that's what the Germans did. The Germans sloped armed, they put their, put their weapons straps on their arm, and they marched back home. It was almost like it looked like almost a victory parade, but they lost. And this is going to be crucial to the psyche of the Germans, because there's going to give this illusion to the Germans that we really didn't lose. We could have kept fighting. We could have won World War I. And yet this horrible peace treaty is going to be imposed on us. This is going to begin the myth of the stab in the back. Something inside Germany weakened us. Communist is what it's going to be. But who would this lead to? Yeah. Hitler, who in August, a mustard gas attack blinded him. He was back in the hospital in the area. So when the war ended, he never saw the collapse in September and October. And so he, like many Germans, had this illusion, we were winning. We could have won this thing. He was there in the spring offensive. So with that, the war is over. And there's going to be a peace agreement. Before that ever happened, though, this goes back to January of 1918, Woodrow Wilson would list out his path for peace. To make this so we won't fight this awful thing again, 14 points, so we just doubled the 14 points. Now the 14 points, by the end of the war, are going to get these kind of mystical, almost mythological feeling, like somehow these will be the golden road to peace. When the Germans agreed to the armistice, they agreed to the 14 points. But the 14 points were always unrealistic with a bad reading of history. They weren't real. This, in reality, was propaganda. But Wilson, in his own way, believed it. The main elements we have to get is self-determination. We will let, and it says it in some of the points, in fact, it specifically mentions the Slavs and Poland, their own state. It also says no more secret treaties. But the biggie, what Wilson laid everything, was an international organization called the League of Nations, or simply the League. Everyone just called it the League. And all the countries would be represented, and this would use, here's the word, diplomacy. Diplomacy to solve problems in one location before they became war. We have this place where we meet, we have a dialogue, and we can end it before it's war. Getting potential enemies together, have a forum they can meet, have a forum for diplomacy, an open forum. And this was a very liberal idea at the time. Yeah.
What do you say for diplomacy?
They would use diplomacy. So diplomacy, which is political talks between different countries, to stop war before it happens, to stop aggression. But here's the hammer. What if it still happens? There needs to be deterrence. To deter aggression, collective security. And what collective security means is this. The League members, if there is aggression. So let's say Austria invades Serbia at the beginning of the war. This idea would be Wilson's ideal. The League members would send troops, they would send their navy, and they would stop Austria. Collective security. They would all unify together. And this is one of the things, sounds good. Sounds good, we'll end war. And so nobody would do it because they thought the rest of the world beating them down. And there was a logic to it. There's kind of a, it's very almost so easy. We could just do it. This is going to be, this part will be Article 10 of the Treaty of Versailles, collective security in this new League of Nations. You see, what's the problem though? Let me ask you this. Let's say it happens, we're alive and it's 1914, and we got this League of Nations, and Austria invades Serbia, right? You see it, right? We live in Montana, if you didn't know. How many people in here want to go fight and die to stop Austria from invading Serbia? Okay, obviously Emily. Does anybody? Do you see the problem? Do you want to be forced to go fight and die for another country? I mean, if it's your own best interest, or if it's in your own interest, but this is what breaks down. Countries don't want to be forced to do this. And this will be the flaw. Okay, tomorrow then we'll finish it. I would have been a little bit further, but we had an interruption for which I blame potential assassins. So when would the DBQ be? How hard would the DBQ be? Very easy. No, I don't know. You need a notebook?
Yeah.
So was deter aggression, did that go with the nations?
Yeah. And so the League of Nations, if diplomacy failed, they would deter aggression with collective security. So say, oh yeah, if you do attack somebody, we'll all get together.
So it was just like a collective security was like a backup plan?
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is everyone can tell is, are you really going to get all the countries together to really go do it? Okay. Just can't do that today. Yeah. You look what's happening right now in Syria or Libya. It doesn't happen. Sounds good.
I forgot to get the book to you.
Why?
I forgot it. I was tired.
Then I see Anna again. Everywhere I go.
Ready for real?
I about threw it. I thought I didn't want to spill, but bring it. Not a big deal. Your grade will be docked. That's all right, but not a big deal.
Only 3 letters, right? For what? Oh, I was going to bring this.
Yeah, 30%.
That seems fair.
Maggie, I know you don't want to leave this classroom.
I'm getting there. You need to get off my case.
Savannah, don't hit the wall.
You don't need to.
What did that wall ever do to you? By the way, I did finally get the picture of you dressed up as gangsters, all ready to put up. But I screwed up and I blamed George. I cut George off. Savannah was knocking him out of the way. So I have to go back, hopefully George in the picture. Because I took it real fast because you guys were all like attacking each other last night. We're gonna dress up as rock and roll. And I've already picked what band you're gonna do for your. You wanna know? Yeah, you're doing kids. You're gonna dress up as all four, so quadrants of your face.
Did they come in during your
They
last
did.
class?
Thank you, Drew. That was very nice. And I said, why didn't you wait till next period?
Well, yeah, they like texted me and they said they were coming at 12:30, but then like I found out, so I was gonna say like, oh, you should just wait until like later. But then I think they were doing them at different times. So I was like, oh, I think like it would have like literally been like, we're not doing anything for an hour.
And the funny thing is that's my really small class, and 3 of them were gone.
Oh, so you only had 2 people? in
No,
class?
I had 5.
Oh.
But that's a weird
I thought it was
class. I've never
5.
had anything like it.
Was that only got you like nominated?
Oh, that reminds me.
Yeah, he's my distinguished educator.
Thank you.
That was
very
Phil.
nice.
Phil got one this last period.
I think
I know, they sent me a text message last night,
Yeah,
so I've
you-
been really excited all day.
Who wants to wear the helmet? Actually, this one's based on a modern one, and it's too comfortable.
Yeah, 'cause you could also like come in and like.
Katie's up to no good, I can tell. You think one of these fine students would assault you? Wow!
Kirby got his distinguished educated teacher thing from Maddie.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was gonna give him.
honestly, I would
Is
have.
that Is this like a new one?
Yeah.
From like when?
Yesterday, I made it in my backyard shop. George, once again, I'm blaming you for not having a picture up. I think maybe you could draw yourself in.
No, actually, so because mom cleaned it, but you can't get. So yeah, these are like the right days. Trying to do with yeah. Wait, somebody's here just a little more. But it's like it's not really like he's gone one half.
They're like
Yeah, no, I think I talked about it our freshman year, we thought our sophomore year, probably our last year. Definitely about it.
because
Yeah.
it's like these teachers have that AP students have, right? Got the advantage, you know.
No, but on Southern Day, our freshman year, we're on the last.
It's gonna be
Or not last year,
He's gonna be a lot there. Eric, you better give me one.
Come on, Eric. No, Eric might get it. Eric got the honors. So, fuck your sister.
First in class.
I don't know.
There's so much.
Are you gonna wear it?
Well, you're in the middle.
Okay, so I have good news followed by more good news. You want the good news or the more good news?
Good or better?
The test is today.
Yes. Was that more good news?
And the reason why I'm doing the test today is because, you know, I just don't want to see you guys tomorrow.
Well, I think we're at like Super Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, we should mention that. No, the test will be Tuesday, so. Wednesday. No, the good news is, and in fact, I almost forgot this till Teresa did remind me. I was going to tell you about why the House Select Committee on Assassination said there was a conspiracy. And that might be kind of a big deal, because I mentioned it in the class, and, I'll tell you that later, in the bell rang. Kind of a big deal. They say there was a conspiracy, they thought it was organized crime. And, oh, we're still being filmed. Hope none of you swore. Whoops.
Not inflection.